Welcome, everyone, to the Power of Integrity podcast, where leadership aligns with principles. I'm Ralph Adamo, your host, and today I couldn't be more delighted. We have Ryan Stramrood. Ryan and I met each other in Scottsdale, Arizona, but Ryan couldn't be further away. Right now, he's in South Africa, where he lives, resides, and was born and raised. And he's got a story to tell us that's absolutely intriguing. I'd like to introduce him a little bit and tell you about him in the matter that his book, let me get that close to this camera, Pushing Past Impossible, is just absolutely delightful. I was able to hear Ryan speak, and I had to have him on our show. Good morning, Ryan, and thank you for joining us, although it's evening where you are.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning. Let's go with morning. Makes the day feel longer. Hello,
Wonderful.
everyone.
Wonderful. Well, Ryan, I'd love for you to tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your journey, because it's been a heck of a journey that you have been on, and you've been on it for some time, and you continue to
Indeed.
plow forward, and it's really intriguing, and it's an inspiration to all of us.
Well, thank you. So I'll try to give you the nutshell because that took me a whole book to say who I am. But I'm first and foremost the complete average Joe. There's nothing special about me. At the age of 29, about to turn 30, I was still a couch potato, doing really well in business, running a sales house and doing my thing and making bucks and running a team. But I hadn't done anything in the sporting world at all. It was never an interest, and I had put myself in a position that I idolized people who did stuff in that space. And it was just something that I never aspired to. And while I was running my business, things happened that we can probably unpack a little bit later. And I eventually made a lifestyle decision just to start getting myself a little bit fit. And the one thing I used to do back in junior school was I used to swim. So I thought, well, I'll join a little swimming squad, which was recommended to me by one of my advertising clients. And that started the most phenomenal journey for me. You know, anyone who's been to South Africa or Cape Town, where I live, the ocean waters all around us are really cold. You know, they're not great fun, and very few people will swim without full wetsuits on. And after I started to get a little bit fit in the swimming pool, which was a story all by itself, I started to do some ocean swims. And the more ocean swims I did, I never wear a wetsuit, by the way. I always want to be pure. I'm Speedo, goggles, and cap. And I started to notice how the element of cold, the cold in the water that everybody hates, how that impacts us humans. We, as humans, we have not evolved well to handle the cold. We've evolved very well to avoid it. So when we throw ourselves into cold water, the body and the mind starts doing unbelievable things to get us out. Now, like me in the beginning and everybody else, when you walk in that cold water and you think this is absolutely terrible, you get out because that's a natural thing to do. But through another interesting part of my story, I decided to stay in a little bit. And through the repetitive nature of what I was doing, I started to figure out that this burning desire, this pain, the panic, and the fear, and all these things that were happening in my body was just a very overzealous defense mechanism designed to get us out of that hostile environment, being the cold water in this case. And although that water will eventually kill you if you're stupid enough to stay in too long, however, where your mind tells you it's time to get out is not when you need to get out. And that simple message started to fascinate, or message discovery started to fascinate me. So I started to push my boundaries a little bit further in the cold, a little bit colder. Can I go a little further and colder? And it took me on this fascinating journey. And I never had any intention of becoming an inspirational speaker. But it's a journey that has taken me right from my desk in Cape Town, selling advertising space for a number of clients, running a team, all the way to some of the biggest stages around the world, which is where I met you, Rolf, in Arizona and Scottsdale. And that's where I am. So hopefully, I said nutshell. Believe me, it's a much longer story, but that's a nutshell version.
Yeah, well, we'll get a little bit into it. In fact, we'll get a little deeper into it, if that metaphor applies. I'm curious,
But
you had just mentioned something, and maybe our audience snapped to it, the boundary between what the mind wants and what the body actually can contend with.
yeah,
Where would that boundary be,
yeah,
where the body has to capitulate, and it's really
yeah.
a bad idea if one is stupid enough to stay that long?
Yeah, well, that's the golden question, and that's probably why I've made a bit of a name for myself with my buddies. doing some crazy things back in the day because we were really pushing boundaries. Nobody knows. But what we eventually pushed and why we got some notoriety is because medical journals and medical science said that's possible. And we had worked our way up to what it said was possible. And we thought, well, let's see if we could actually push past that. And that's what took me to Antarctica to see if I could swim further in really cold water, and managed to do the first official ice mile in Antarctica in water that's 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's actually below freezing because the salt water freezes a little bit lower. And as you experienced, Ralph, I tell a wonderful story that got me up to that point and the lessons that I learned there. But to answer your question, where is that point? We don't know. And obviously, I'm not trying to get anyone to swim into ice water here. The messages that I give across are very applicable to your day job, sitting in the corporates at your desk, or running your small business or your big business, whatever it might be. But what I get across really, really loudly, there are two things. One is that I'm an inspirational speaker that is quite different to many other inspirational speakers. I don't stand on stage, hopefully you notice this, and say that anything you put your mind to is possible. Just think it and you can do it. I'm not that guy. In the world of cold water, that cold water is eventually going to kill you. There are only two outcomes for me in Antarctica, as an example. Either I'm going to warm Antarctica up to my core temperature, or Antarctica is going to cool me down. Which do you think is going to happen? Right? So I know there is an end point, okay? But where my mind is telling me that end point is not where it is. So you've got your mind saying, turn around here, and you've got the real endpoint danger over here, and the magic happens smack in the middle. And that is what I have discovered and really explored, and I've put together quite nicely in a story to share and help other people, because it's not all about ice water. It's about scary decisions, about hostile business environment, or just an uncomfortable space. We are so driven by the decisions, by this unbelievably powerful tool of ours, the human mind, the gateway to absolute greatness that no one ever argues when I argue how powerful the human mind is. But I get a few wide eyes when I say that this powerful tool of ours is our biggest limitation. It is designed to keep us safe. It is designed to keep you all in your lanes, in your comfort zone. It doesn't want you taking the big risks. And that applies to ice water, or it applies to day-to-day life, or it applies to business. And that's where I've put it all together. So I've lost track on exactly what my answer is. I think it was, where was the limit? And no one knows where the limit is. And that's why some of us in our various genres who call ourselves ultra extreme sports people, we are trying to push those limits a little bit. And I've pushed some limits in cold. It's not all about the cold for me. I think I've gone as far as I want to in the cold. I'm also not a cowboy. I don't feel like dying. I'm not that dumb. But there are still some very, very big goals out there that I'm going to try and push.
Yes, yes. Well, it reminds me of the story here in the States of that 4 minute mile and Roger
Yeah,
Bannister, where he was warned that if you try to break a 4 minute mile, your lungs could collapse. It'd be a
yeah,
terrible outcome.
yeah.
And that was the medical conventional wisdom, and pushing past it. And then within, I think, a year, 17 others pushed past that 4 minute mile once he broke through that threshold. Has
Exactly.
that been the case with folks around the world and following in your footsteps?
100%. And obviously, I have followed those before me who have opened the doors. And once you see it done, and you believe, and you thought it couldn't be done, and you see someone else doing it, it just triggers something. And I've also read some stuff which I would love to unpack more. But even if I didn't know someone did it, but they had done it, it makes it easier for me to do it. Someone said that, but that's a bit wishy-washy. Um, I recently did a swim here in the West. There's a body of water called False Bay. It's to swim across False Bay. It's 33 kilometers, which is about 20 miles odd. And it's very scary water because it's a very well-known feeding place for the great white shark. So, you don't want to spend more time in it than you want, than you really have to, should I put. But anyway, there were 5 people in the world who have ever swum from one side of False Bay all the way across to the other. There have been about 30 or 35 attempts. 5 people had made it. And I decided I wanted to try and swim across it, but I wanted to go the other way. Now, everyone conventionally had said, don't be stupid, because the wind blows this way, the currents run that way, you need to go with the flow. You're going to look silly if you try the opposite direction. But with the support of my team that I put together, we did the research, and I did the training. And eventually I gave it a go, and I got across. And I happened to get the fastest time anyone's ever done. I got a Guinness World Record. No one had done that swim for, I think, 9 years before I did it. Now, and that was 3 years ago. Now I think about 25 to 30 people have made it across. It's just, it is possible that way, and that looks like the better way. And you didn't get eaten by a shark. Maybe we're overthinking this. Let's give it a go. So it's just creating platforms. I live by the following. It's I wish it was my quote, but it's not. It's Oliver Wendell Holmes. I'm sure you know this quote. It's world famous. That a mind expanded by a new experience can never return to its original dimensions. Now, I love that because I live it. I live it. Every time I do one of these swims that I don't think I can do, I set a goal maybe a little bit higher than what at the time I think I can do. That becomes my platform when I'm setting my next goal. You don't then stand back down where you were originally to say, right, what's next? You stand here. Your vision is different. And that is so applicable to any scenario in your life. And you don't always have to push the boundaries. Sometimes we like our comfort zone and our lane and delivering steady performance. But every now and then, if you really want to grow, and I suggest everybody does really want to grow at some time, it's all we've got, you've got to step outside of that comfort zone, outside the lane. You've got to take that risk. You've got to be the first to try it. Or you've got to try something that you don't think you can do, because that's where the growth happens. And that's just something that I discovered quite late in life. I'm now 51, by the way, so it's 21 years on this journey for me. That I've literally gone from a desk that I'm sitting at now for many years, doing well, happy, family, food on the table, doing well, to now 3-time Guinness World Record. I have my own book that you showed earlier, and it's behind me on my shoulder. I'm writing another book. And my diary is full of flights. Jet lag should be my middle name. But it's just not everyone likes that. Someone will think, well, why on earth would you want to do that to yourself? But it's just such an experience for me, and such a growth opportunity. And I'm loving this journey.
Yeah, for sure. Riding the wave, right?
Riding the wave.
Riding the wave. So coming back to the core, the core of topic that this program's about is about integrity, and integrity lends itself to authenticity. Maybe speak to what integrity and authenticity mean to you as a world-class, accomplished Guinness Book of World Record holder. What do those two words mean to you?
Oh, they mean a lot to me, and it's been quite a journey unpacking them. Although I've never really sat down and studied it, but you learn stuff in your early days. So I can wear two hats. I can wear my business that I ran for 25 years, and how integrity played a role there, as well as becoming an extreme sportsman and how integrity played a role there. And that has been a really fascinating journey for me, especially in the swimming side, because some of the challenges, and this I'll just jump into the first example. In the early days, I started to make a little bit of a name for myself with a couple of mates, and we started to push these boundaries, but usually in some of the most remote places on this planet. No one else is there. No one knows, no one's ever been there, because we're trying to do world firsts. So now you tell the world and you PR that you're going to go and try this big challenge, and the water temperature is going to be this, and the weather's going to be that, and it's going to be all scary, and you're going to push yourself. And then you get there, and the water temperature's way warmer than you thought, and the weather was quite nice, and the currents weren't there on the day. Now you don't have a story. You might do the swim, but your really tough story. So where I'm going with this, what we found was people who had done swims all around the world where we are wide-eyed, like, how on earth did that person achieve that? Once we've got there to do it ourselves, we've realized there's a lot of bull dust that comes with it. And you can decide early in our days, do we become those people who blow it out and make ourselves look good and let me stand on stage and no one's going to know? Or are we going to be the guys who are, and the person individually who says it how it is? If you fail, you fail. If it wasn't that cold, it wasn't that cold. If you didn't have to push yourself to the brink, you didn't have to push yourself. Don't build it up. And integrity plays a huge role in that. It is inner. Don't try and put yourself, don't ever take credit for something that you didn't do. And always give credit for those who did it authentically. and with integrity. So that's just one taste of how I got it, how I felt it in the beginning. And believe me, as this journey took off for me, the pressure to perform, the pressure to come home with a wonderful story is massive. And it might be hard for everyone to understand. I mean, I remember I wanted to be the first in the world, stop me if this story gets too long, but I wanted to try be the first in the world to swim from Russia to the USA solo. Now, it sounds a lot better than it is, but the year before, I was part of an international relay that was a world first thing that was trying to swim from Russia mainland all the way 84 kilometers across the Bering Strait to the States, to Alaska. That's going to be a massive part of my next book. It was an incredible scenario. No one will ever solo that I can say quite comfortably, unless you do it when it's iced over and you can just walk across. But from a swimming point of view, you're going to battle. However, in the middle of that Bering Strait, there are two little islands called the Diomede Islands. One is called Ratmanova. It is an American, that's the Russian island. And then there's one called Little Diomede, and those are 3.8 kilometers. So I'm just trying to think of the miles. If it was 4 miles, if it was 4 kilometers, it would be about 2.5 miles. So it's about 2.5 miles between them. So it's not very far. But this little island is in Russian water, and this little island is in American water. And the international date line runs between the two. So this one is 21 hours behind that one in time. So it becomes a very interesting swim. You're either swimming into the past or you're swimming into the future, whatever, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And it intrigued me. So I went out of my way with a group called the Mad Swimmers to try and get to this exceptionally remote place. And they were all doing it in wetsuits and gear. I wanted to do it purist, so it would be my Speedo goggles and cap. And there was a lot of hype back home not back home, around the world, because I would have been the first to achieve this officially as a male anyway. Lynn Cox had achieved it, so a friend of mine and an American woman, so I must just credit her. She did it back in the 1980s. But I wanted to be the first to do it the other way around, and all my usual differences that I throw in. And very long story, Rolf, which I'd love to share, but it's actually a really good story. But a long story short is that I can't claim that record because I did not exit the Russian island and swim across and exit onto the American island. You've got to clear the water on both sides if you can, unless it's a sheer cliff, right? Now, we didn't get permission to go into the Russian water. And the Russian island is a military base. Okay. And remember, when you're crossing USA-Russia borders, they like you to go through the normal ports, the official ports. So we tried really hard to get permission and we were denied. And I thought I'd be clever and let's just go anyway, because when you're in these really remote places, things get, the locals always know loopholes. And, so I traveled from Cape Town to Johannesburg to London, London to New York to Anchorage to Nome to a little place called Prince of Wales, and then I got on a boat out to the islands. So it's a long commute and it's properly remote. And I was typing back and everyone was following the story. And of course, then because we were denied permission and because it's a military base, all the locals on the American side where we were based said, "Hell no, don't do that. You'll get shot out of the water." And that is something that sits in your mind. Then we measured the water temperature, and it was about 34 Fahrenheit. No, it was 3 degrees Celsius. Sorry, I should have had my cheat sheet here. 0 is 32 Fahrenheit, so it would be about 35,
maybe 38.
38.
35, 38.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
you better than me. 38 around there. So it was cold. It was a lot colder than what we researched it should be. So and every degree makes a massive difference when you're swimming in a Speedo. We lost half our support team because the expedition company I'd hired to help us across refused to go across the international border because they lost their permits and their insurances and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, it was a disaster. And I swam. I didn't exit the islands, but I decided I'm just going to swim. I went right up to the Russian island. They dropped me at the island. And then I thought I'll just swim as fast as I can to get across the imaginary line into American water, and then I'll be safe. And of course, lots of other things happened. And I swam the 3.8 kilometers. So I did the actual distance, but I had gone a little bit skew. Long story again, the currents had caught me, and I never exited onto the American island. However, somehow I was still in the water when the news got back to the press that I had made it. So when I eventually got back to connectivity, which is not great in those remote places, it was all over the news that Ryan Stramrood has done it, and well done, and especially back home. It was headlines in the papers, the local newspapers. And I then had to have I could have just left it. No one would ever know. But I had to have the integrity to go to each and every one and say, no, I did not make it. I cannot claim it. And these are the reasons. But the pressure on me in those days, now it's a lot easier. And I don't care anymore. But in the pressure in those days when I was so hungry to make a name for myself, so hungry to succeed, I put such a lot into that trip. The pressure to just say, nod your head and take the credit was heavy. But I never did, thankfully. So, but anyway, that's one of my integrity stories.
No, well, doing the right thing when no one else is looking and no one else can figure it out. That is internal integrity for sure.
Indeed.
When we're in full alignment. Indeed. You have a few things I think our audience would enjoy, those that are getting a chance to watch it. Would you like to share a couple of the things and maybe walk us through that journey with some of the visual slides that you have?
Some of the visuals. Okay, some of the visuals that we put up, I'm just going to remember how to present again. Might not make a lot of sense to everyone because they obviously follow kind of a keynote. Can you see it there, Rolf?
Absolutely. So you're diving off of what looks
Yeah.
like a large freighter type boat or some sort of cruise
Yeah,
boat.
so it's an ocean liner. We weren't sponsored, so when I wanted to go and try and push the boundaries of what was known to man in those days, we couldn't take our own ship because we're not sponsored. So we were paying passengers on an ocean liner that went into Antarctica. And that's the ship that I'm jumping off there. So what you're seeing, that particular jump, you can maybe see there's a rope around my waist. So that wasn't the official swim. That was just what they call the polar plunge. It was after the actual challenge, and that it just looks like quite a dramatic photo. What it is, so it's still cold. If we move on, so that's do you want me just to run through like this? So
Yeah, I think so. Please.
this was one of my first swims when I was much younger. I found myself in the English Channel trying to swim the 20. It's actually 40 kilometers in total. So about 25 miles. I was a novice swimmer, and of course, testosterone got the better of me, and I ended up entering for the English Channel, thinking I was better than I was. Well, I say that I made it across, but it was one of the biggest learning experiences of my entire life. So that's a little picture of me, with a big super tanker going past. Early days in the English Channel. And the one thing you really look for in that channel is you want nice flat water. And things went horribly wrong for me. You can see it got really, really rough. Unfortunately, I've taken the little video clip out because it wouldn't load. But it became one of the toughest swims, and I hit the wall. The tank was empty. I was 9 hours into the swim. I was freezing cold. It was pitch dark by now. I was chafed. I'd been stung by jellyfish. I drank lots of salt water, and I absolutely tapped out. I couldn't go any further. And for your listeners, those who understand the concept of hitting the wall, when you hit the wall in a running race or a cycle race or something that is land-based, it's devastating. It means the tank is empty, you've got nothing more to give, and usually it's where your challenge ends. So you'd spend a lot of time on nutrition, making sure you don't hit the wall, and pacing. I'd hit the wall. When you hit the wall in the English Channel, where you've been swimming for 9 hours, 6 of those 9 hours have been really rough water, and the waves have been rolling me around. It has now got dark. That water is cold. I am freezing cold and bitterly unhappy. If I even put one hand on the big support boat that travels alongside me, I'm instantly disqualified, and I've still got about 4.5 to 5 hours of swimming in the pitch dark to make it to the French beach. That is just it's a scenario that is hard to describe to anyone who's not in that scenario. But it was this amazing epiphany for me because I discovered what I now present on stage in much more detail, by the way, the switch that you can flick. Every single one of us has got this untapped power tool, the human mind, but it comes with the default setting, and that default setting keeps us in the self-protect, keep ourselves safe, don't make decisions that might end in failure. When you hit the wall, it's time to get out. That was my reality. It was my world. It was how I had performed a lot of the time up until this particular swim. And yet, through basically having a really, really good team, and through some other epiphanies that I had treading the water out there in the pitch dark English Channel, I flicked a switch that I like to describe it, and it took me out of the self-protect way of looking at my immediate barriers and the impossibles and put me into what I call self-explore. And it just changed my perspective. It wasn't a wonderfully enlightening, oh, now I feel great moment out there. I was still bitterly unhappy and miserable. But I compartmentalized the challenge in a different way to how I had seen it before in that very moment, largely thanks to my team. And for another 4.5 hours, I swam. I don't know if you can see, that's me in the pitch dark with a little light stick in the back of my head, making my way onto French, still being on the French coast, still being rolled around. And eventually I made it 13 hours later, stood on that French beach. And then, you don't get to stay in France. So I had to travel back to Dover. That's my brother and part of my crew, just wiping off some of the grease and soothing some of the jelly stings. And I'd made it. So that was a real epiphany for me. And that changed my world, looking at me, how I perceive all those little impossibles in my life that just keep me in my lane, delivering steady performance, but not stepping over that line and taking a chance. And I just looked at myself differently. And that's what started the real journey for Ryan. And I don't know how long you want me to go on, but okay, that's just the GPS track of my English Channel. For those who are wondering why I didn't swim in a straight line, that English Channel is very tidal. So I swam for 13 hours. And tides change every 6 hours. So you can see I drifted 6 hours one way, and then I drifted 6 hours the other way, and then I started drifting the other way again, which then took me into the French coast. So I actually swam, if you look closely on that, I don't know if you can see, but it's 50 kilometers, which is about almost 30 miles. But obviously not all of it was self-propelled. A lot of it is drifting. And yeah, it started this incredible journey into cold, because I started to understand how the element of cold is making me negative. Again, we're not evolved well to handle it. So one of the defense mechanisms is that it implements pain, panic, and fear in your head, and they come together in a split second to accentuate self-doubt. You start to look for reasons why you can get out of this horrible environment, this hostile environment, and into, in my case, into the support boat alongside, where I can wrap a blanket around myself and be comfortable again. And I started to push my own boundaries in this to quite a degree. And the more I did it, the more I started to realize in my day-to-day life and in my business, the decisions I'm making are governed by my fear of failure and my fear of stepping over the line and my lack of knowledge and appreciation for growth. We can all perform all our lives and be happy. I'm not saying everyone needs to be uncomfortable. And if you're genuinely happy, then you're genuinely happy. But until you step outside that comfort zone, until you try something, you make yourself vulnerable, you accept the fact that you might fail. And you 95, 99% of the time, you're going to succeed, even though you didn't think you will. The growth that comes from that. If you don't get outside your comfort zone, you cannot learn new stuff. You keep doing the same thing over and over. When you stop learning the new stuff, you cannot grow, be it as an individual or as a business or in whatever regard. And when you stop growing, you get overtaken by those who are. You keep carrying on here and you start looking at all those other people. How lucky was he or she? Look at that. Wasn't it amazing? Oh, they got so lucky. Or, oof, they're better than me. They're cleverer than me. They all these other things than me. They're not. And that's what I started to understand in my own world. The people that I put on pedestals have been great idols for me. But I used to just put them on pedestals, clap, clap, clap at their keynote speeches, and then go back to my day job. And it's only much later in life that I realized, hang on, I can do that. And I figured it out, sometimes by mistake. And as soon as I did that, then, as I said, you start looking for the next thing that's a little bit higher. I don't know if you want me to go further on the pictures, Ralph.
No, I wanted to comment just a bit. It's reminding me, as you're so humble about this, and you started. I'm just an ordinary guy. There was a coach. He passed away from North Carolina State, a college basketball coach, Jim Valvano. He spoke, and you're going to speak at the $1 Million Roundtable. You said that off camera before. $1 Million Roundtable being a life insurance association. And Jim Valvano spoke there, and he said, every day, ordinary people accomplish extraordinary things. And and he and he got that message, and he continued to work with that message, trying to teach his players about being, don't worry, stay ordinary, but do extraordinary things
Yeah,
by doing it one step at a time. And it's just
yeah.
resonating with me.
Oh, well, good. And yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know that example, but it's absolutely who I am. I couldn't be more normal or more average. But I'm sure you'll agree, Rolf, when you hear my keynote, which is genuine and just some of the stories, few of the stories that I share on stage. A lot of people go, "Oh, bull dust, you're not. There's nothing average about you," and I argue with them. There's nothing really, nothing special. I've got no clever ability to self-heat my center core. I'm no different. I'm as lazy and as in love with the comfort zone when it's time to do comfort zone stuff than everybody else. I love the couch, um, but I've learned the value of growth, and yeah, that's that's been my journey.
Yes, well, absolutely. You're teaching us how to push past impossible, regardless of whether that environment's in the extreme, ultra extreme cold water, or
Yeah,
just in what we think is a hostile environment because we're having to brave through things that we haven't done before. You use
correct.
the Oliver Wendell Holmes quote, and I like to use the visual analogy, or at least the word picture of, anytime you take a rubber band and expand that rubber band and stretch it, it never shrinks back to the same size. And that's what I think you were trying to tell
Yeah,
us with our Oliver Wendell Holmes, is that we're
absolutely.
always something bigger and better after we've stretched ourselves. How aren't we?
We are, and again, I do another keynote that you haven't seen. It's a follow on from what you have seen, and that is called, it's called lots of things, but it's kind of beyond the summit or failing forward. And it's a keynote on, this, what you saw is my journey from the couch to great success. And with great success comes great risk. And often after consecutive successes comes a little bit of lack of discipline, a little bit of complacency, a little bit of arrogance, a little bit of I'm bulletproof now. And if you don't keep a beady eye on that, it kicks you in the butt. And I got kicked in the butt, and it's a wonderful lesson of what not to do and how not to mismanage when that failure happens, and how, because you get two kinds of failure of. I'm sure you know this, but just to state the obvious, everyone knows, oh, failure is part of the process, and you must fail to succeed. And every great entrepreneur or businessman out there, or billionaire, has failed more times than they succeeded. All those lovely stuff, and it's absolutely true. But if you fail and you don't acknowledge that failure, you don't acknowledge your role in that failure, you don't go vulnerable, you don't introspect into it and milk it for its lessons, that failure is just failure. And you will repeat that failure. It's when you do all those nice things that I did, that's where you start taking the lessons out of that failure, and you start to understand that failure and why, and you acknowledge, well, maybe it wasn't just all those other things that caused it. Maybe I could have done that and that and that different, which might have impacted and brought a different result. And from that comes the good kind of failure and the growth. So and it's a wonderful story with great visuals as well.
Yes, there was a sales trainer here in the U.S., Richard Sandler Sales System, who said, when you lose, don't lose the lesson. In a very basic way.
You got all the quotes. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
So
beautiful thing. I've never been interested in quotes and reading up in psychology books about the mind, but after doing all the stuff I've done, I've written stuff down and come to epiphanies about what's happening. And then I go to the books and I realize there's exactly what I'm feeling written. So I've almost done it the other way around. I haven't read it and then gone, oh, that's what's happening. I've kind of like, hang on. And so I've also loved that part of the journey. I really am the kind of
yeah,
average hacking it out there adventurer that's figured a lot of stuff out.
you alluded to something a little bit earlier, and because it resonates with me, maybe we'll explore it for a moment together. You alluded to the notion, and you said, well, that might be mumbo jumbo. You didn't use those words, almost voodoo, like
Mm.
when something happens in one part of the world,
Yeah,
literally that consciousness transmits to another part of the world.
yeah,
Yeah, that non-locality principle exists in quantum physics. Yes, that
yes,
consciousness exists, right? And
yes.
that things are connected regardless of the space in between.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly it. And one of my closest friends, a guy called Cameron Bellamy, who's probably the best swimmer on this planet. in terms of hardcore and distance, not speed.